Thank you, Monica, for having me here, and thank you all the students for making time to listen. I'm going to step in and out of the mic. I have a loud voice, so you will be able to hear me. Trust me on that. All right. I'm going to try and say some things which are a little radical here. Okay. And I was asked to speak about decolonizing and thinking about design identities through that. All right. So let me start with the word decolonizing. Rather, the part D in the word decolonizing. What is this word? Right? Let me give you some examples because I think it's interesting for us to think about it at some level. The word derive, depend, decide, deject, decapacitate, depression, demote, deficient, right? Decaffeinate, all of these words have D in them. What it really means, and it comes from the Latin term da, means to be off with something, right? Like off with someone's head. So what then does the term decolonize mean? Indeed, what then does the term design mean? Is what I'm going to force you to think about today. Right? Does it mean off with something? Right? In fact, that's what I'm going to ask all of you to do. I'm going to ask, and this is what I've been asking people for the last 10 years or so, to stop thinking of themselves as designers of what you do as design. Right? Because I think in doing so, in calling ourselves designers and thinking of what we do as design, we are actually falling prey to a particular history which is constructing us in a very, very funny manner, and which is actually getting in the way of what we are trying to do. Let me tell you some things about this history and what does it really do. Okay? Part one, what it is, it's a chronological history. It's a history which says things like this, and we've heard that today many, many times. The design has always existed. No, it hasn't. I'm sorry. This word is a very recent word. In fact, this word comes with multiple colonial connotations. It comes out of a particular Western idea of what is creativity. Number one. Let me give you another example of this. This is also a history which constantly fixes things, right? I give an example through my own field architecture, right? Let's take, for example, the Red Fort. All of us will certainly say, oh, it belongs to the 15th century. Really, does it? If it does, what the hell is it doing in front of you? Right? History, this history constantly pushes things, turns what is time, which is not necessarily linear, into something very linear. So that one thing comes here, second thing comes here, third thing comes here, fourth thing comes here, and we begin to understand all processes in the same manner. And that is a fundamental problem with this idea called design, where we have not even understood what time and what time's relation to processes actually is. That's one thing it does. Second thing that it does, this history, is that it configures geography in a very interesting manner. Right? Let me tell you how. All of us, when we were students, when we were taught, right? But if we take, the survey of design, survey of architecture, survey of all of this, we are told that architecture began, let's say, I don't know, somewhere in Mesopotamia. They went on to Egypt, comes to India in a certain way. And then, there's medieval architecture, there's Renaissance architecture, there's modern architecture. See, again, that kind of a linearization. But not only that, each of these phases of this history is located in a particular geography. right? So ancient architecture happened in Mesopotamia, happened in Egypt, and maybe happened in India. And then we think the rest of the world had nothing to contribute to it, right? And then we think Renaissance happened in Italy, and then the rest of the world had nothing to contribute to it. We think modern architecture happened somewhere in Europe, and the rest of the world didn't have anything to contribute to it. This is a very problematic assumption that we have constantly made in our discipline. What it has fundamentally, right, elided and not allowed us to understand is the collaborative nature of knowledge itself. Right? Number three, which is a very, very problematic aspect of this history, right, is that this history constantly, by evoking this geography, also evokes a geography that is outside of its own history. And in doing so, it places many things which are extremely creative outside the bound of creativity. I'll give you an interesting example of what happened in the 1960s in this country. All right? So in 1972 is when the Architects Act was formulated in this country, right? And when I was going through my own work and I was looking at what was happening in the parliamentary debates, there were 2 or 3 kinds of groups who were arguing with each other for the use of the title architect, right? One group, interestingly, got to present their arguments, went on to then get that bill passed in the parliament and come back. As a result, what happened is all the other forms of people who had before 1972, actually they were practicing, they were making buildings. They could have been craftspeople, they could have been carpenters, they could have been woodworkers, they could have been builders. All of them could suddenly no longer use this term architect anymore. You know what it did? It sidelined them. It marginalized them. Right? And it took one group of people and said what they do is the truth. Right? 3 things that I've just told you. 1, it takes everything, turns it into a linear process. Number 2, takes that history, makes a particular kind of a geography, and this geography is always centered around the West and creates a difference between the West and the rest. Number 3, it creates a specific kind of an authority for the expert and then reduces others who might have multiple other ways of doing things into terms like, well, vernacular architecture, non-designer, craft person, things like that. As long as we keep invoking these terms, incidentally, the term design, and I'll come to its history in a second, we will keep calling up this history. We will keep calling this history, which will keep doing this to us again and again and again. So my fundamental request to all my friends, all my students, esteemed designers who are here, is to stop using these terms completely. And can we think of new ways to categorize what we are doing? It's going to open our minds, colonize our minds in very interesting manner, right? Lastly, I would like to end with this little history of this term, design itself. So I said it has this word, design. Incidentally, the first time it was used was actually to reject any authorship. Do you know that? Because design went off with the signature. And look what we are using it to. Constantly sign ourselves in. This history is part of the problem and something I want to caution all of us against. Thank you.